It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we're discussing Volatile Memory by Seth Haddon. Would you like to do the plot or shall I?
Okay, I'll try. So Willa is a trans woman scavenger in a sort of space capitalist hellscape. And she comes across, she follows an announcement of somebody who's put out a sort of rescue beacon and has said basically, you can get my cool special cyber power mask if you get to me first. And then when she does get to the mask first, the mask turns out to be possessed by the memory of a lesbian, and then they have adventures.
Yes. This the sort of the most interesting thing about this setting is that the tech du jour are these masks, which impart the wearer with special powers and senses and like
Animal
hacking
themed
abilities
masks
and cyber presence. And yes, they're all animal themed, which is very important. Are there lesbians in this book? Well, you've already mentioned that the woman in the mask,
Sable, is a lesbian.
Yep, Sable, a lesbian. And Willa, also a lesbian, I think. I don't think that there's anything in the text to contradict that.
Mm-hmm.
Wizards? Do we have wizards?
Kind of. I mean, we've got like evil. I think, yeah, the whatever they're called are definitely wizards. Wow, that was helpful.
They're called subsidiaries. Which should be your first clue that this is a cyberpunk novel.
But there's like special cyber enhanced assassin corporate guard types. We've got some sort of technology indistinguishable from magic going on here, and those people are and presumably also their corporate overlords. So I feel like what we actually have are sort of, we have the specter of wizards, but we never see the wizards directly. We think we're going to, and then...
Yeah, this one is more of a stretch than some of the others that we've discussed. If we want to do the old, the Empire is wizards by default thing.
Well, the thing is that it's set up to make you think that there's a wizard.
The person who ends up being the focus of their roaring rampage of revenge has some wizardly traits about him, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But really, yeah, it's the reason that I'm inclined to call this Wizards versus Lesbians is more because of the thematic content than because of any actual wizardry that is taking place in the text.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, the thing is that if you like books that have wizards fighting lesbians, this has a lot of those same elements, even if you don't get really a proper wizard.
Yep, we've got the Empire, we've got the lesbians struggling against the Empire, we've
You've definitely got the sort of revolutionary power of queer desire.
We've got the possession and the fusion ideas.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm going to say, sure, close enough.
Yes. And there's certainly some conflict. The lesbians certainly have things to fight.
To the extent that there are wizards, they're fighting the lesbians.
Yes. Now,
why should you read this book?
Well, I think when I said if you like that kind of story, this is going to have, if you like those elements, I think that this will have that. It's got, I think I liked the masks as a bit of world building. And I thought that the relationship between Willa and Sable, I really I enjoyed watching that one unfold because it was more interesting and nuanced, I think, than like a lot of romances get these days.
Mm. Yeah, I would say, as you said, this is sort of, hardcore, 5 years ago Wizlas thematically, at least, and in terms of what's going on in the plot. And in addition to that, it's we've done some books with trans protagonists before, and they're all to some extent about being trans and to some extent about the plot. And there's a different sort of mix of how much is about being trans and how much is about the plot in each of them. I would argue that this one is mostly about being trans.
I mean, I would, part of that is just that I feel like the plot is the weak point of this book.
Yeah, the plot is a series of metaphors on which to hang the ruminations about being trans.
And other kinds of queer. There's also, I think, some ruminations about being a lesbian.
Yes.
It is, yeah, I would say that this is definitely ruminations about queerness through a series of metaphors. As far as that goes, I found it a lot less annoying and precious than a lot of books that are doing that, though.
I mean, it does help that we're still in the science fiction plot at all times.
I mean, I think that part of it is just it doesn't get bogged down in needing to rehash all of the, all of like the very specific cultural signifiers and debates of our moment. We can talk more about this post spoiler zone, but I think that it's more sort of about alienation, as opposed to very specifically what is it like being this kind of label at this moment, but projected onto a fantasy or science fiction world.
I might disagree with that slightly, but
Okay,
again,
well, that'll be
we
fun.
can get into it when we
Yeah.
reach the spoiler zone. But the reason that I bring it up here is if that sounds good to you, if like we're really pushing the meditation on queerness to the front and not being as interested in like plot or action sequences, then you might enjoy this, and it's short.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't you read this one?
Well, I didn't think the plot was particularly compelling.
I'm gonna do one of my rare "it probably should have been longer"
Yeah.
things, unfortunately.
I don't know if it should have been longer because there's also some places where it was kind of saggy in the middle. I think it felt a little underbaked.
It felt like the ideas came first, and then sort of we needed a plot to put the ideas on.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps the characters and the ideas that the characters are attached to came first, and then we needed a plot to hang the characters on. And there's the reason that I'm like say that it's more about the vibes than about what's actually happening in the text is because what's happening in the text is kind of so standard.
Yeah.
Once you get past the masks and that kind of cool stuff that
Yeah, it's got cool vibes, but it's an incredibly standard MacGuffin plot with like very little in the way of making it more interesting.
Yes. And the prose is kind of up itself a little bit, or at least to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would agree. It's a little, it feels a little overwrought and without earning it necessarily. There's not quite enough interesting stuff here, I think, to make me enjoy that level of prose.
Yeah, no, that is very much a your mileage may vary thing, but the register of the prose is such that the book wants you to really, take on that we're talking about very important and deep things, and whether you agree with it on that is, going to be your question to answer. So content warnings, we have sexual assault, we have
Murder.
kidnapping, we have murder, we have state violence, sort of unpersoning, plenty of, significant injuries, someone's face gets torn off.
Yep.
Yeah,
and also some transphobia.
yeah, kind of table stakes for this kind of wizards versus lesbians stuff. Oh, transphobia and misogyny.
Yes.
And so, this is not a everything like default bisexual, everything's okay but world. This is all of the horrible things from our world, including corporate hegemony turned up to 10, and the military industrial complex, and culturally enforced homophobia and misogyny, and the panopticon and data tracking and all that. They're all present.
Yeah. This is, despite being in space, this kind of has more, this feels in some ways more like an old cyberpunk novel.
Yeah, I mean, it's barely in space, in quotes.
Right.
It's just sort of, you get from point A to point B, and then you get from point A to point B kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it feels more like cyberpunk than it does like a sort of glove kink cinematic universe science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Because the world building, the further away you get from the masks, the more sort of spotty the world building becomes. This is just sort of a space for these characters to exist in.
Yeah.
I've said that same thing like 3 or 4 times already in different words. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to say it more times as we continue with this recording.
Yes. All right. So spoilers then.
Yeah, let's get on to it. We do talk ourselves into thinking that the register of the prose is probably appropriate, given who the narrator is. And this reminds me for no particular reason that in the content warnings we forgot to mention that one of the characters kills themselves. On with the show.
So I think I may have been slightly overstating the case when I was like, that it's not complete. I think what I meant was that it is better about being ruminations on queerness than, because I feel one of my real pet peeves in a lot of the contemporary queer speculative fiction I read, and boy do I read a lot of it, is that so much of it involves one or another character just sort of looking at the camera and rattling off their exact identity, in Tumblr phrasing, or alternately making like just really egregiously working in all of the, very specific cultural signifiers to be like, this is how I am demonstrating, so that you could, without them saying the specific nouns and adjectives, you could in fact describe their exact identity the way that somebody's Tumblr bio might. And this at least doesn't do that. It feels like, even though it is still very much of, it feels like it's not exactly of like this cultural moment as opposed to like the past decade. And, so it feels like it's sort of a slightly broader rumination on the alienation of being queer, than being like really, really invested in being part of this very specific cultural moment.
I think that you're right. I think that just on that level, I think that the reason that I was going to argue this point is not so much that it wants you to it wants to tell you like what's going on here, but I think that it is drawing from some very like specific contemporary culture, and particularly contemporary trans woman culture stuff in creating these metaphors. And this is the moment where I say I'm not a trans woman. I read a lot of stuff written by trans women and talk to trans women, and so I've absorbed some things, but neither is the author. So so I feel like we can, we're both having this discussion at a certain remove from the first experience, but like what this relationship reads to me like puppy girl for robot girl, T for T aesthetic. So what did he mean by that? Well, I'm calling Sable a trans-coded character despite her having the memories and experiences of a cis lesbian, because the Sable we know in the text is a bodiless cybernetic entity who has taken on those memories and those experiences, which to my mind is both textually trans and fits the trans feminine robot girl archetype. And Willa wears a pranimal mask all the time, you see, and the way they complete each other or cancel parts of each other's identities out, and the way that in turn is affected by the ghost of the dead version of Sable, raised in misogyny and cut off from her body by trauma. Do you see what I mean when I say the story is about being gay and trans in capital letters? We have two like sort of archetypes of trans femininity here. One of which is embodied in the rabbit mask, which is the sort of like, everything on the sleeve, like uncomfortably aware of the flesh being embodied, the meat core of it all and its consequences. And being like sort of assigned by your place in the universe to this role um, of perpetual victimhood, versus like the situation that that Sable finds herself in. And it's interesting that Sable, the entity, is like also alienated from her femininity.
From her body.
Yeah, but in along completely different valence. The entity called Sable is probably not actually the woman who was called Sable, right?
Right. This is the upload, and it's I liked how the book is sort of dances around that. I think that worked fairly well, because it worked fairly well in making it clear that this is not the original woman, but neither of the narrators want to admit it. So
Yes. The sort of the point being that they both find themselves alienated from their ability to be who they are, whether that is a woman, or whether that's like a living thing, whether that is somebody who's able to have meaningful emotional connections to others, whether that's somebody who is able to just to be present in the world without being, consistently feeling othered and hunted and alienated. But the way that the two of them experience this runs along like such completely sort of separate lines, and sort of the book's thesis is that they complement and complete each other, and yeah, I think that this sort of draws from from a lot of like contemporary conversations about ways of being trans feminine that I see around, but again, not a trans woman. And so can't get too deep in that, can't pretend that I'm in that or like, or know it on a deep level. I'm just, I speak on this as the grungler, as the guy who's around, which is a much better term than the ones that we used to have for the guy who hangs out, the sort of the guy who hangs out with a lot of lesbians, or the guy who hangs out with a lot of queer people generally that we used to have back when I was young. But I'm not sure if any of those terms ever got much traction, honestly. There was Mike, which was meant to echo hag. Although I always preferred trike because, you're the third wheel. You get it? I don't know if Grungler has legs or if it's even known outside of Tumblr, but I will claim that term. There's also, of course, Chaser, which is universally recognized, but I would argue it has significantly different shades of connotation. Thank you very much. But yeah, so that's why I say that it feels sort of contemporary in that way.
Yeah, that's fair. I think you're right. It feels contemporary in that it is very much sort of speaking about, that it does feel very rooted in contemporary accounts of being trans feminine. Mm-hmm. But it still feels less immediately invested in, I guess, the cultural debates of the day.
No, it's not. I don't think that this one has an axe to grind along any particular aspect of that. I think this text has taken in a lot of these ideas and is using them as sort of grist to generate the science fiction notions that this is coming for, and like the science fiction notions that it's using. And I think that like we should probably talk about just the masks generally, because
yeah, I was about to say let's talk about the masks, because first of all, nice little metaphor there.
Mm-hmm.
I really actually enjoyed that the rabbit mask is one of the standards. That I really enjoyed the idea that a prey animal ends up being a super useful thing to emulate in this world, because I think that is an underexplored thing in a lot of science fiction, which tends to really want everybody to be deadly predators. That
Yeah.
like you can only be cool if you're a deadly predator, right? And the idea that sometimes what you actually want is to be hyper aware and a little bit panicky. That I think that worked both as a point of world building. It helped really establish some of the cyberpunk feel of it, because even though cyberpunk tends to really sort of original cyberpunk, where you're not necessarily hero protagonist or whatever, but that where you really are being outnumbered and outpowered by these massive corporations. Um, so I liked that a lot.
I mean, I was particularly like charmed by the fact that these aren't homebrew masks. Like the rabbit mask, the I'm a prey animal mask is constructed by the corporation, marketed to you,
Yes.
and that it is giving you, and it lets you have this role that it is produced of prey animal, which is very useful for you because of the world that you live in. But
It's also just sort of a nice little metaphor on the ways in which PTSD and anxiety can be maladaptive but also useful.
oh yeah, very much so. And on the way, the gender roles we strive to embody are commodified and sold back to us.
I guess I don't know. I like the idea that there's something wonderfully cyberpunk about a story where the corporation is basically producing, we're going to give you trauma and anxiety, the mask, and people are buying it so that they can survive on the edges of society. That actually felt like a good observation about the sort of dystopian modern society.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely like uh, capitalism will sell anything to you. Will sell literally anything to you. If there's a need for it, capitalism will sell it to you. And if there is a need for the ability to creep around on the edges of society, constantly terrified, capitalism will sell it to you. And on related note, we're brought to you today by Proton VPN. No, we're not.
Capitalism will sell you your own trauma in a nice little package.
My sentence was literally, capitalism will sell you a t-shirt which says I'm traumatized, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt.
Right. So that I thought was, and also that was actually, it didn't beat you over the head with it. It established the rabbit mask, and then it showed you all the ways in which Willa is using the rabbit mask effectively and not so effectively. And when she loses the rabbit mask, it actually feels that feels like something of a loss, even as it's definitely this sort of reconnecting, empowering moment.
And I wanted to pick up another thing that you mentioned, which is that in a lot of like the super weapon MacGuffin is generally supposed to be the one that allows you to, to inflict violence on others. And to some extent, Lyrebird does do that, but that's not what the point of Lyrebird is. And I really like how we think initially that it's a predator.
Right, the hawk to Lyrebird. I really liked that.
The hawk pretending that it was a weapon was a way to draw people in, but its actual power is mimicry. Its actual power is passing.
Yeah.
That its actual power is to let you erase the categorizations that have been placed upon you by capitalism so that it can sell you your trauma. Having identified you as a person in the trauma demographic who might be interested in your trauma products, and instead let you slip into something more anonymous or something more malleable. But with that comes the price of that Sable has paid, which is that you have this, when your identity becomes that, malleable and fragile, then there's a whole different set of problems that come with attempting to be a person at that point, particularly if you've spent your entire life being told what kind of person you are by the sort of invisible forces of marketing that create the ways in which we construe our own identities in today's society. And we've got to the end of the topic sentence of our 5-paragraph essay.
Yes, and there's I did feel like it was a little perhaps overblown. The oh well, everybody else they've ever tried experimented upon with Lyrebird has gone insane and died, and then only Sable was able to live long enough to run off to another planet and kill herself.
Well, the idea being that the reason that Sable was able to survive the identity dissolution is because she
She's
has
a
spent her
closeted
entire
lesbian.
life. Yeah, exactly. Because she's spent her entire life dealing with not quite being the thing that everybody thinks that she is,
Right.
asked to play a role that she's not, and so she has decades of experience pretending, uh, and both to
Right.
herself and to others.
No, I felt like that one it could have been a little more subtle.
Well, I mean,
With the
there's
everybody who we've ever tried this on died.
there's a gradation of subtlety generally, and I feel like the closer that we get to the we're talking about misogyny, qua misogyny parts of the text, the less subtle it gets.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's just because of wanting to avoid any ambiguities on that front, or what. But I think the whole like I am the kidnapped child bride of Fister Alzian, a name that I would have liked to have not been that for a number of reasons. That whole thing is like, I understand that there's like we want this to be very clear, but could we have maybe made it, problematized it a little bit to go with the way that we're problematizing other ideas in other parts of the story?
Right. Because I feel like making it that unsubtle ends up weakening it a little bit. It doesn't work quite as well as a commentary on contemporary society. Not that there aren't still people, even in America, who end up being child cult brides, but if this is since I think that this is supposed to be more a commentary on the misogyny of sort of our everyday hellscape, I think that the way in which Sable is just sort of married off at 17 or 18 to Mr. Alcyon didn't quite, it felt a little bit anachronistic, I guess. It felt like drawing on the more everyday misogyny, which is what Willa's experiencing, couldn't be enough to make the point, and I don't actually think that's true.
Yeah, this actually harkens all the way back to the problems that I had with the Barbara Cormorant books. It was precisely this, that it felt like the the way that this becomes sort of a complete society wide uh, inability to live authentically as a woman, period, because of these cultural forces, is a commentary on a world that we have lived in, but is not a commentary on the world that we are currently living in. And thus, it might skew the conclusions that you're drawing about the world that we're currently living in, and the solutions that you're offering about the world that we're currently living in.
Right, partly because the ways that Willa is experiencing transphobia and transmisogyny are very contemporary.
Yes, are very distinct. I liked. I mean, speaking of unsubtle characters, Orkian and the Ox Mask.
Yes.
the 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 guy who is not a good male ally, I'm afraid. um,
But you think he is at first, and then
well, you think that he might potentially have been decent on some level, but
until pushed just a little.
yeah. Well, I mean, until she transitioned is one of the things that is mentioned, but that this guy's store of misogyny, which was already present, was not immediately apparent to Willa before Willa transitioned, and after Willa transitioned, it becomes clear that he, in addition to transphobia, he is willing to employ just plain misogyny if it works
Right.
in this situation. I will accept that you're a woman enough to treat you in a misogynistic fashion and
Right.
in no other way, which again seems pretty true to life.
Yeah, that was well observed, I thought, which again is part of why I feel like Sable could have just been a closeted lesbian socially pressured into a really bad marriage without having necessarily been a child bride on a station of other child brides.
Yeah, I agree. Um, I mean, we're leaning into the misandry a little bit here, which that's again is not a problem in and of itself.
That's true.
But
There are no token good men in this book.
there's not a single token good man to be found in this book. There's not room for one really because it's so
There's two men in this book, and they're both awful.
and we are centering women here, and again, not an inherent problem. That's fine, but it does mean
I
that
mean, also, really, there's like four characters in this book.
true.
There's our two queer women, and then there's their two male antagonists.
Yes, but it is notable that the two male antagonists are like A, irredeemable scum, and B, irredeemable scum who the point of the book is that the correct decision under the circumstances is to murder them. And C,
Well, I think some of that murder is just coming out of the cyberpunk setting.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But,
But,
this.
but it is not treated as an easy decision. It's
Yeah.
treated as no, we have to come to this conclusion together, and it's part of our, understanding each other and deepening our relationship. That in our fusion, in our more perfect understanding of the world that we live in, and the person/person/person that we want to be together, killing these men is in fact the correct thing for our personal character development.
Yes, I think the murder of Orchid is more called for by the conventions of the genre. I feel like because the murder of Orchid isn't about he is a man and the evils that he's done are specifically male and this is why we're murdering him. He's being killed because you're in an environment that can't show compassion.
Sure.
You could replace him with a woman who is really awful, and the narrative would also be calling for killing her because and you can this is definitely a limitation. You can definitely criticize this cultural feature of the genre, right? There's definitely a sort of thriller, science fiction, or fantasies which is particularly vein, which is particularly strong in cyberpunk, where it really is about let's create a cultural sphere such that murder is justifiable so that you can feel guilty about doing the hard thing where the hard thing is murder. And you can definitely criticize wanting to set everything up so that you can have this be the justifiable called for decision. But I don't think that one's as inherently gendered as Fister, where definitely they track him down mostly so that they can break and murder him.
Yes.
This is not a good idea necessarily. Like I understand that this is part of Sable's personal growth is to connect to her memories by tracking him down, but I feel like they could have done this in other ways, and that really Fister is being tracked down and murdered because he is an evil man, and as an evil man, it is important to our now disembodied lesbian's personal growth that he die.
Yeah. I think that the only reason that I highlight the Orchid's maleness as being a significant part of the way that his death is handled is because his role in the story is to be a man.
Yes.
Whereas Fister's role in the story is to be the man.
Right. Orchid is sort of what you would expect any random guy from Willa's broader social circle to be like. That is kind of exactly what he is.
Right.
Because
like
when he shows up, it's like, oh yeah, Orchid, he's a dude.
Yeah, down to the like ox mask that he wears,
right?
Which is like it increases your strength, your
right.
physical strength. That's it. And then even after his death, we have to experience gender dysphoria by mimicking his voice.
Yeah.
thing, which
Just
is
to
like,
really drive home that he's your everyman.
yeah, and like that even that approaching his essence, even though it is a necessary thing of for their for Lyrebird's power and for the sort of the passing that they're doing, is inherently distasteful and unpleasant. Speaking of names, our heroes finally free themselves by removing Orchid, or performing an orchiectomy, if you will.
I don't think that his gender is irrelevant. It's that I think it is an interesting decision that will, because to some degree we have two parallel narratives running, right? We have Willa and Willa's emotional journey, which is about erasing herself from the culture so
Mm-hmm.
that she can fight. Instead of trying to adapt herself into the culture, she's going to erase herself and leave entirely and fight. Versus Sable's, which is about getting in touch with the parts of herself that had been erased. And I mean, I guess in one case, erasure is empowering, and in the other case, unerasure is empowering. And so you have these two parallel narratives running, and in one of the cases, the death of the villain is absolutely called for by his inherent maleness. And in the other case, his maleness is definitely part of his character and thus why he dies, but his death is more called for by the conventions of the genre. Because these are slightly different genres of the two stories.
No, I think that's a good insight, and I do like. I mean, the parts of the book that I like most, and the parts of the book that I think are the most worked over and are and considered and form sort of the emotional core of it, is the conflict between these two approaches, like the need to the the rabbit masks, sort of symbolizing Willa's desire to be erased, to be a subject, and to not have this this need to do and to make and to create, versus the need to reestablish one's agency and to become an actor on the world that Sable represents. And I like the ways in which that it definitely does not say that the relationship between these two is necessarily good for them.
Right.
It's like, I don't think the book thinks that like going after Fister is necessarily the wisest move either.
Right.
I don't think, I think that like the way that they're sort of continuously accidentally or intentionally trampling each other's boundaries, like looking into each other's brains, setting each other off and traumatizing each other, is the core of what's happening here. And I think that one of the funniest things in this book is the bodiless robot asking itself, is this desire unhealthy, when it wants to take over her body?
Well, right. I think it is a fascinating bit of characterization of Sable that she's doing all of these things that are where she's trying to take over Willa's body, and yet everything that she's framing it to herself as, oh no, am I being a predatory lesbian?
Right? Am I the
This
chaser?
is all right? Well, and also she is framing all of this stuff about through the lens of having a crush on and desiring sexually and romantically the person whose body she's trying to possess, when really what she's doing is trying to get back a body.
Yes. And there's a lot of stuff here about how this kind of like really, uh, hot immediate romance, because this is another like love at first sight kind of situation. Compare and contrast with the love at first sight we got a direct descendant in terms of how this is, how I would want somebody to write this and how this is supposed to feel.
Yeah, I think this one worked much better.
Absolutely.
And part of that is because this kind of obsessive love at first sight should be incredibly bizarre and toxic, actually.
Right. It's like,
This might say something about us, but as opposed to about literature, but
but no, I think it's well observed. It's like you don't get that sort of, oh, this person fills a giant hole in me if you don't have a giant hole in you, right?
right.
This book is not interested in forgetting about that giant hole or papering over it. It's interested in and how messy and unpleasant it is. In some cases unpleasant, in some cases unhealthy, in quotes, in some cases like just a bad idea for your continued existence in the world. It is to, use somebody else to try to fill that hole in you.
But it does a fairly good job of selling you on why both parties find this so compelling.
Exactly. And one thing that we haven't mentioned is that this is also a fine, unreliable narrator text.
Yes. This is actually great. It's a good use of combined first and second person.
Yeah, no, that gimmick is earned. It works. It's clever. It doesn't like, and this is maybe part of why the sort of the overwrought prose might be excused, because if we are thinking about this as being written specifically from the point of view of this robot girl who is in obsessive love with the flesh girl, and is trying to justify all of her decisions that she makes over the course of this book by waxing rhapsodic about said flesh girl in a maybe kind of creepy way, if you step back a few paces, in a way that you could in fact construe as predatory.
Predatory or just unhealthy.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of difficult to really put your finger on where the power dynamic exists between the two of them, since one of them has a body and the other one doesn't. But I think the book is not interested necessarily in answering that question.
Oh shit, we forgot to put suicide in the content warnings.
Okay, I'll take care of that.
Speaking of why does Sable not have a body? Well, she shot herself.
Yes. But as I said, it's interested in asking these questions more than answering them, which is good. That's good art.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. And I think you're right that some of the overwrougentness of the prose is justifiable, because Sable's, 22 or something?
Sure.
And Sable is just very...
And has had no emotional development to speak of since she was 17.
Right. She was 17, grew up in what seems to be something of a cult, was married off to an older man, and other than occasionally getting to hook up with some of the other child brides, really doesn't have any chance to form relationships with anyone outside of her abusive husband. So I guess it's not surprising that some of this reads like a very overwrought diary from somebody's first serious romance.
Mm-hmm. Although, again, it is the only perspective that we get, and I feel like I should make clear, if you're listening to this without having read the text, like, we're talking about this as if the majority of the words on the page are about the relationship, and that's not true. Like, there's over half of what's going on here by weight is a relatively standard science fiction story.
Yeah.
And so it's
chasing one MacGuffin and then another.
Yeah. And so you have to, like, the question of how significant it is that this, narrator might be unreliable, and the question of, like, whether what they're doing is, the morally or emotionally correct for them thing is not actually like considered within the text very much. That is left for the reader.
Yes. Though, even in these moments of very standard science fiction plot beats, because it is being told in sort of combination first and second person, from one of the characters narrating what the other one is doing, and also all of her emotions and observations of that character. So the relationship, their dynamic is still very obvious, even when we're just going from plot beat to plot beat.
Absolutely. So how about that ending? What do you think of the ending? it took me by surprise. You know, I was e-reading this, and I was like, we're on my book, we're about 84% in, and then it's done. And I was like, I was really expecting there to be something else happening here, and I don't think that was just because of you know what the length of the book was telling me, but also because, as you said, the thing that we're sort of set up to be afraid of for the entire book doesn't really show up. You know, I suppose that we were potentially, you know, waiting for a sequel or something like that. But do you think that's intentional? Do you think that it's like this is the fear of the ultimate thing that society could do to you, and you know, in the end, you know, whatever?
Yeah, I do think it's absolutely intentional because we have what's going on with Fister as very much sort of the symbolic same thing, right? Fister looms large. We think that Fister is going to be a wizard. He's
Right.
so powerful and terrifying in Sable's memory because she married him at what 17 or 18, and she was an abused wife. So and then he shows up and he's nobody. Part of that
Mm-hmm.
is that, you know, they show up armed and with this dangerous stolen mask and a spaceship and all of that. They're not vulnerable in the same way. But it's also clear that this guy was never really that much. He was just a shitty, abusive husband who didn't like his wife, and so he signed his wife up for invasive medical trials. I mean, right? Like he's not a scary guy except to Sable because she was she was in this position of vulnerability to him, and that and so I think that that's the sort of interpersonal level, and then you're blowing this up to the societal level, and so and there is still the threat, right? There's the whatever they are, subsidiaries or whatever,
Yeah.
who are, I think, supposed to be legitimately scary. It's just that they run away fast enough. Our characters, Will and Sable, run away fast enough that it doesn't matter. So I think that it is on purpose. It felt a little abrupt, and part of that I think is a limitation of the perspective. We don't really get to see Willa coming to we don't get to see Willa's reasoning leading up to, and then the sort of emotional climax that leads her to completely erase herself from from all the databases.
Mm-hmm.
We get some of the buildup of how important it is that that she's such a good hacker that she'd gone through and manually hacked everything to make her have the correct name and gender throughout all the databases. And so clearly the decision to erase herself from them is a major one, but that didn't feel like it was building up. And so, with that being the resolution of, oh, wow, you've just deleted yourself from everything, now we can really fight, didn't really pay off in the ways I was hoping for it to. And so, it definitely, and to me, it didn't feel completely out of the blue, but
Mm.
I I kind of had the impression reading it, where I was like, this is going to end abruptly and somewhat unsatisfyingly, and then it did.
I have a couple of thoughts on it. One of which is that, as you say, this is a queer desire, is the Revolutionary Force story. We have that with the relatively unsubtle metaphor of Sable being the one who survives and is able to use the mask. In addition to the fact that, you know, our queers are revolutionaries,
Right.
the
And their merging is what gives them the power to fight at the end.
yes, this is another sort of weird fusion metaphor. Whether I don't know whether we're talking about communism or whatever Steven Universe was on ultimately, but so since we are largely pro that, and that is the mood that the book wants to sustain, there we have to look away at a certain point because we don't know what happens next, almost definitionally, without, like, you know, planning the revolution in front of everybody. And that's just sort of a thing that happens with these plots, is that it's hard to, you know, deliver, you know, an ending that actually satisfies. So a lot of times we choose to look away instead.
Actually, I think that that's part of why I had this feeling that it was going to end abruptly and unsatisfyingly as we're leading up, is that it's clear that it's trying to build towards this. Our personal revolution is also a social revolution, but there's because what everything that they're doing is so individual, there's no real sign of a broader revolution going on. And so it doesn't really matter what kinds of personal revolutions they have. They're still just one and a half people in a spaceship that doesn't work particularly well. And I don't think that the narrative was just not capable of selling me on this personal revolution being scalable up.
Yes, I would say that's accurate. I think there's also like the gender metaphor level on which to construe it. It's like, so, you know, the goal of their personal revolution has been the destruction of the ability of the state to dead name them. And
Well, no,
ideally,
that already happened. That happened before the book starts. That is actually the interesting thing, is that for Willa had already removed the ability of the state to dead name her. Now she's removing the ability of the state to live name her either.
she's removing the ability of the state to construe her at all. This is in fact,
Which is an interesting choice, narrative choice.
that is the thing that I was about to embark upon, but I just wanted to say that sentence because I thought it was a funny sentence to say.
Well, unfortunately.
As I often do, I've traded accuracy for the funny in the moment, which is a habit that you have been catching me on for over 25 years now. But again, I digress. What I was going to say was that we have, you know, our masks metaphor here, and we can think about this next to the idea of queer desire being the revolutionary force, right? Mm. One of the issues with construing queer desire as the revolutionary force is that once you achieve revolutionary goal A, for example, you were allowed to get married, then you are able to be construed as a kind of normal person who could have a kind of nuclear family and thus be, you know, subject to the same capitalistic forces and cultural hegemony that, you know, straight people who are married are the subject to. And that leads to a kind of dead end in revanchism at that point.
Or alternately, it leads to your, it leads to being able to visit your significant other in the hospital while they're dying and not coming home to an empty apartment because their family took all your stuff.
I am speaking from the perspective of a person who is interested in revolutionary stories here, and revolutionary ideas. This is not me talking about what I personally believe. The next part of that is, okay, so we have arrived at a thing that is now beyond the pale and is trying to be pushed farther out beyond the pale by conservatives, which is being trans, and particularly being a trans woman. There is a finish line to this, wherein if you are trans, you become a woman, you pass in the eyes of the government, you pass in the eyes of the culture. Now you're a woman. And you are subject to the same hegemonic cultural and political forces and that women are subject to. And this book is very interested in misogyny, in part because it wants to remind you what that means or what that has historically meant. So,
which does make Sable's cult bride thing work a little bit better metaphorically through that lens. I will. Mm-hmm.
So what we have instead is sort of what we have on the cover of the book, which is, okay, we're taking off one mask, and then there's a woman, and we're taking off that mask, and there's something else underneath that mask. What we actually want is some revolutionary zone where, trained by being othered, by being queer, by being trans, by being somebody who has had to be a chameleon, and somebody who's had to be a prey animal, and somebody who has had to be a liar in order to stay alive in this system. We are using that to find a state where we can no longer be subject to anybody telling us what we are whatsoever, which is like the end point of these people's specific revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what the ending is about. How this generally works out in the real world is that the third person arrives at freedom by becoming rich and powerful through a series of Everard Clare style shenanigans.
I think that makes sense in terms of an interpretive framework. I think my problem, the reason why I find it ultimately unsatisfying is that, like so much cyberpunk, it romanticizes being invisible to the overlords, but it is being written by people who, by and large, have social security numbers and have never had to try to get a job without one.
It's another, I mean, if you turn this kind of thinking slightly to the right, it becomes libertarianism.
Yeah.
It becomes like, well, we hasten to remind you that you're still using the resources that were created by the culture that we are all living in, and that we all actually need to contribute to in order to continue to survive.
Well, I think it's also it's this idea that becoming invisible to the system, that erasing yourself from the system will empower you because it is possible to live outside the system. And by and large, in real life, what generally that's actually making you more vulnerable, not less.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, otherwise,
yeah.
Migrant workers and people without an urban hukou and mainland China would be the most powerful revolutionary people. I think this is to some degree the same one of the limitations that we end up running up against whenever we're reading these Queer Desires, the Revolutionary Force, which is that these books, where they tend to fall flat, is drawing that connection between your personal revolution and the social revolution. And so this book has failed to sell me on that. That's fine. So do most of them. I think in this case, because there wasn't enough of an interesting narrative arc underpinning it, and thus the heaviness of the metaphor ends up feeling a little lackluster at the end.
We're even though it's been a while since we recorded it, we're publishing this back to back with To the Resurrection Station, and I think that one of the things again that I find that I miss from science fiction from that era is that in that era you could have come up with this context and then we could have just have wandered off with it. We could have had the masks and this relationship and like the and all of the questioning of the self and identity, and how codependent it is that you want to live in my actual body, and how hot that is and so forth. And we could have done it without the cruft. We could have done it without the revenge and the possible social revolution and all of this stuff.
Well, or alternately, I think you could have still had the revenge and the possible social revolution. I just think that this book could have gotten weirder with it. I think that if you really do want to sell me on the sort of the revolutionary power of personal revelation, I want it to be a lot weirder. I want you to give me a world that's strange enough where I can buy into that. And some of that is just, this could have made me more uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I would like this to feel more challenging, and so maybe I've come around to convincing myself that actually this book is too much of the moment, politics of the moment, because in the end I didn't really feel challenged. So
there's so much room for Sable to be deeply, deeply fucked up.
Right? I wanted Sable to be way...
And Willa too, particularly.
But Sable in particular could have just been way more unhinged. So.
And probably should have been, is the thing.
Right.
Like,
I mean, this is a post-suicidal in that she has successfully killed herself cult refugee who has uploaded herself to a mask that the point of the mask is to make you a more effective liar. And she's the one telling the story. I would have liked to have been lied to a little bit. I would have liked her to try to sell me on some more outrageous lies, honestly, as the narrator.
You know what? You're absolutely right. I think that's the thing that is keeping this text from hitting the next level, is that it is too affirming. It is like, okay, we're fucked up, but we can still be happy. We can still be in love. And it's like, that's great. However, if you undersell how fucked up it is, then you're not going to convince me that it can still be okay.
Yeah. So it reads too much like Sable has sold herself too well on the comforting lies that she is trying to tell us all.
Yep, I think that's just about the shape of it.
All right, so I feel like we have discussed this book.
I think we've discussed this book. I enjoyed this conversation. I enjoyed this read.
Yeah, definitely. I think this one might have been recommended to us. If so, thank you whoever recommended it to us. I don't know what we're doing next, but
neither do I.
We'll
find out.
Possibly a short fiction roundup, actually.
That would be nice and easy, which I enjoy.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.